I was sitting in my old wooden chair, the one with the cracked armrest and the faded cushion, when it happened. My knees were weak that morning, but my heart felt strong. I had baked bread for them, warm, soft, just the way they liked it. I even saved the crusts for little Jimmy's dog, even though Jimmy himself hadn't visited in weeks. I had set the table with care, placed the teacups just right, and waited. It was my birthday, my 78th, and I thought maybe, just maybe, they hadn't forgotten. Then I saw the van pull up. They all came down, all 7 of them. My heart swelled. For a moment I forgot how long it had been since I'd seen them all in one place. I stood up too fast and nearly fell. But I was smiling. I was crying. They didn't bring flowers. They didn't bring gifts. They brought papers. Legal papers. I didn't understand at first. My oldest son Matthew looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you can't stay here anymore. It's time." "What are you saying?" I asked. My voice was shaking. "What do you mean it's time?" "The house," he said. "It's better we sell it. We already signed the documents. You just need to sign too." I looked around at the others. Not one of them met my eyes. They stared at the floor, or out the window like strangers. I could feel something breaking inside me, not a bone, not my back, but something deeper. Something that had held me up for all these years. "You want to throw me out of my own house?" I whispered. "It's what Dad would have wanted," Matthew said, as if that made it right. I had nothing to say. My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. They didn't even wait for me to answer. They left the papers on the table and walked back to the van. I stood there alone, surrounded by silence, with only the sound of the engine fading down the road. I stared at the papers for a long time. Then I picked them up, and that's when I saw it. They had already sold the house. Without me. I couldn't breathe. But that's not where this story begins. No, that was just the part that broke me. The part that made me ask, how did it come to this? Why would the 7 children I gave everything to betray me? Let me tell you how it all started. I was 29 when my husband, Richard, died.
À car accident.
A rainy night. A truck that never braked. He was on his way home from the factory, soaked in grease and sweat, just like every night. He always came in tired, kissed me on the forehead and said, "One day, I'm gonna get us out of this hole, Clara." But that day never came. Instead, a police officer knocked on my door at 2:17 in the morning. I remember the time because I was up sewing a patch onto Matthew's only pair of good pants. The officer took off his hat and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. My legs gave way." Richard was gone. I was left alone with 7 mouths to feed. Matthew, the oldest, was 12. The youngest, Rosie, was just a baby. I didn't have time to grieve. I barely had time to breathe. Life became survival. Every single day. I cleaned houses. I washed dishes in diners. I picked up ironing work from wealthier women who never asked if I was okay. I would come home with blistered hands, back aching, and just collapse on the floor. But I kept going. For them. We didn't have much, but I kept us together. There were nights we went to bed hungry. I would lie and say I'd already eaten at work, so they wouldn't worry. Some nights I sold things from the house. The old radio, the wedding silver, even Richard's toolbox, just to afford milk and bread. And then there were nights when things were better. Like the time a kind woman named Mrs. Finley from church dropped off a basket of groceries on our porch. I cried when I saw the canned beans and a whole chicken. I cooked that meal with tears in my eyes and laughter in my heart. The children were full that night. They even fought over who got the last spoon of mashed potatoes. That kind of fight I welcomed. Over the years, each child grew. Each with their own troubles, their own dreams. Matthew was always serious. Too serious. He took on the role of man of the house too young. He'd scold the younger ones like he was their father. But I knew he was just trying to hold it all together. Sarah, my second, had a bright voice and big dreams. She wanted to be a singer but gave it up when she turned 16 and started working full-time to help with bills. We were a team, a tired, struggling team, but we had love. I remember one winter, the cold was so bad we had to sleep in the living room near the oven. I kept it running with chopped wood and leftover paper. We shared blankets, huddled like little birds in a nest. We told stories, played word games, and for a while, we forgot how poor we were. That was the kind of poor that didn't feel shameful. It felt united. And when I finally managed to buy the house, this old, creaky place with more memories than bricks, it was the proudest moment of my life. I stood in front of it with the keys in my hand and told the kids, "This house will always be your home. No matter where you go, no matter who you become." They cheered. We painted the walls ourselves. We planted a garden. We made that house into something sacred. That was the high. But life, oh life, it doesn't stay high for long. By the time Rosie turned 18, all the kids had moved out. Some went to college, some got jobs, some married and started their own families. And I stayed in that house, keeping every room ready in case they ever wanted to come home. I didn't mind being alone. Not at first. I had my garden. I had my tea. I had the photos on the wall. Every corner of that house whispered their names. But slowly they stopped visiting. First it was just less phone calls. Then birthdays were forgotten. Then holidays came and went without so much as a card. I didn't complain. I told myself they were busy, that life was hard for them too, that they'd come around. I kept baking their favorite pies just in case one of them showed up by surprise. They never did. But I still had hope. Until last week, when they came and ripped that hope right out of me. I sat alone in my room that night. Those papers still on the table, the ink heavy with betrayal. I didn't cry. Not yet. My body wouldn't let me. I just stared at the wall, numb, lost. Then I heard something outside. Footsteps. A knock at the door. I walked slowly, afraid it was them again. Or worse, someone here to take me out of my home. I opened the door. And there she was. Rosie. My youngest. Her eyes wide. Her lips trembling. "Mom," she said, out of breath. "You need to come with me. Now. What's going on?" I asked. She grabbed my hand. "They're not done," she said. "They're planning something worse." And that's when I felt fear like I hadn't felt in years. Rosie's hand was shaking as she held mine. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. Her hair was longer, her eyes more tired, but she was still my baby. She pulled me outside without another word. Down the old wooden steps of the porch I had swept every morning for 40 years. I didn't ask questions at first. I couldn't. My mind was still spinning from the shock of earlier. The betrayal, the papers, the look in Matthew's eyes as if I were a burden. I stared at Rosie's car. A small dented sedan with fast food wrappers in the back seat. She opened the passenger door for me, something none of the others had done in a long time. I sat down slowly. We drove in silence for several minutes. The streetlights passed like ghosts outside the window. I finally spoke. "Where are we going?" "To my place," she said, not looking at me. "You can't be alone tonight." "I'm not afraid of being alone," I said. "I'm afraid of what I saw today." Rosie gripped the wheel tighter. "I should have told you sooner. But I didn't know how. I didn't think they'd actually go through with it." "Go through with what?" She glanced at me, her jaw clenched. "They're not just selling the house. They already did. And Matthew's planning to put you in a home. A retirement place. He said it's better for everyone's peace of mind." My chest tightened. I turned toward the window to hide the tears threatening to fall. A retirement home? Me? After everything? After I'd held their hands through fevers, stayed up nights sewing patches on their clothes, worked my fingers raw to give them food. Now they wanted to store me somewhere like an old couch? Why didn't they tell me? I asked. Rosie shook her head. They didn't plan to. They were just going to show up with the van when the paperwork cleared. Matthew thinks it's mercy. Sarah said you'd be better off not having to worry about the house. I let out a bitter laugh. That house was the worry. And I carried it for them. I know, she said softly. I know, Mom. When we got to her apartment, Rosie made me tea. It wasn't like the tea I made back home. No lemon slices, no honey from the neighbor's bees. But it was warm, and she brought it with care. I sat on her faded sofa while she paced the floor. Mom, they've already taken your name off the property records. I found out by accident when I was trying to pay the water bill for you online. I didn't believe it, so I checked everything. They put the house in Matthew's name last year. Last year? I said. My voice cracked. Yes. A full year ago. They said it was to protect your assets in case something happened. But that was just a cover. They've been planning this for a long time. I stared down at my hands. They looked older tonight. The veins more visible, the knuckles more swollen. These were the hands that had held them all when they cried, when they were sick, when they fell and scraped their knees. These hands had worked, served, prayed. And now, they were signing things without me, taking what I built, calling it protection. How could they do this? I whispered. Rosie sat beside me. Because they stopped seeing you as a person, Mom. You became an inconvenience. A line item. A memory they didn't want to deal with anymore. That hurt more than anything else. But I had to ask. Why are you telling me this now, Rosie? Why help me? You could have stayed quiet like the others. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Because I remember. I remember everything you did. You gave up everything for us. And I don't want to be like them. I reached out and touched her face. She leaned into my palm like she used to when she was 5. It was a moment of softness in a world that had gone cold. But it didn't last long. The next morning, while I was still trying to process everything, Rosie got a phone call. I could hear Matthew's voice through the speaker, even though she had the volume low. You have, Mom? Are you serious? Rosie, we agreed. She's not supposed to be in your apartment. You don't even have space. I'm not letting her go to a home, she said calmly. She's staying with me. You're being emotional, Matthew snapped. It's already done. The facility is expecting her by next week. Don't complicate this. Rosie hung up without another word. But her hands were shaking. That's when I knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The next few days were quiet. Almost too quiet. Rosie went to work. I stayed in her apartment. I didn't sleep much. I kept having dreams of the old house, the garden, the smell of my bread baking, the photo frames lined up on the living room wall. I missed it like you miss a person. Then one afternoon, Rosie came home early. She looked pale. Mom, she said. They're taking legal steps now. Matthew's filed for guardianship over you. Guardianship? I said, stunned. I'm not senile. I know. But they're saying you're emotionally unstable. That you're refusing proper care. They're going to try and prove you're unfit to manage your own affairs. I stood up too fast and grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. They're trying to erase me, I said. Not just take the house. They want to erase who I am. Rosie nodded. And then I made a decision. No, I said firmly. No more hiding. No more waiting. I want to face them. All of them. In one room. I want to look them in the eye and hear them say it. I want to hear them justify what they're doing. Rosie hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. If I let them do this quietly, they'll get away with it. I need them to see what they're doing. I need me to see if there's any humanity left in them. So we called a meeting. Rosie texted the family group chat, the one I wasn't even part of anymore, and said we needed to meet. All of us. One last time. The plan was to gather at Sarah's house on Sunday afternoon. And I prepared. I wrote everything down. Not just about the house, but about the nights I cried myself to sleep. The sacrifices I made. The joy I gave up. The pain I swallowed. I wrote a letter, a speech even to remind them who I was. Sunday came. Rosie and I arrived first. I wore my best dress, the one Richard had always loved. Deep blue with tiny flowers stitched along the edge. My hair was brushed, my back straight. I wanted to look like their mother, not their victim. One by one they arrived. Matthew, Sarah, David, John, Emily, and little Jimmy, now a grown man with a beard and a cold stare. We sat in the living room. No one spoke at first. Just awkward shifting, fake coughs and glances at phones. Then Matthew stood. Let's not drag this out, he said. Mom, this isn't about disrespect. It's about safety. The house was too much for you. The bills, the upkeep. I interrupted. You could have helped. Silence. I turned to Sarah. You could have visited. You could have called. More silence. Then I looked at all of them. I gave everything I had to raise you. I lost my husband. I lost my dreams. I worked through illness, through winters with no heat, through nights when I didn't eat so you could. And now you sit here. Telling me I can't live in the home I built? That I need a guardian? Matthew stepped forward. You're being dramatic. We did this for you. No, I said. You did it for you. Rosie sat beside me, holding my hand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of letters. Proof of bills I paid, taxes in my name, photos from when I bought the house. I laid them on the table. This is who I am, I said. And if you want to erase me, you'll have to do it in court. Because I'm not signing a single thing. Matthew's face darkened. Fine. You want to fight? Then fight. But don't expect our help when you lose. I stood slowly. I didn't raise you to be like this. He looked me dead in the eye. No, he said. You raised us to survive. And we learned. Then he walked out. And one by one, the others followed. All except Rosie. And as the door slammed shut behind the last of them, Rosie turned to me and whispered, Mom, I think they're going to come after your bank account next. I didn't speak right away. Rosie's words hung heavy in the room. Your bank account, she said again, quieter this time, like saying it louder might make it real. They're trying to declare you mentally unfit. If the court believes them, they'll get control of your finances. I blinked, trying to steady myself, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My bank account wasn't just numbers. It was a lifetime of scraped-together savings. Pennies pinched from skipped meals. Birthday cards I never opened because I'd rather keep the money sealed inside just in case. That account was my final thread of independence. And now they wanted to cut it. I sank back onto Sarah's living room couch. The fabric was soft, newer than mine, but it smelled cold. Empty. Just like the voices that had filled this house moments ago. They think I don't know what's happening, I said slowly, shaking my head. They think I'm weak. Rosie sat next to me, squeezing my hand. They think you're alone. I looked at her. I'm not. She shook her head. Not while I'm breathing. I smiled, barely. But the smile didn't last long. The next morning, the first letter came. A thick white envelope addressed to me, but the sender was a law firm. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were forms, notices, and a request for evaluation. Petition to determine incapacity. Just like Rosie said. I had 7 days to respond. Rosie and I wasted no time. We drove to the courthouse to find out what we could do. The woman at the front desk, kind but busy, handed us a pamphlet. If someone claims you're not able to make decisions, the court can assign a guardian to do it for you, she explained. But you can fight it. You'll need a lawyer. A lawyer? I asked, my stomach twisting. How much does that cost? The woman looked at me gently. More than it should. But there are organizations that help. You'll want to talk to someone fast. We left with that pamphlet clutched in my hand. On the drive home, I stared out the window, watching the world blur past. The trees, the corner store where I used to buy milk, the park where I pushed strollers full of babies who now called me a burden. I felt like I was drowning in a storm of betrayal. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a fire sparked. I'm not letting them take everything, I whispered. Rosie nodded. Then let's fight. We called a legal aid group the next day. They connected us with a volunteer lawyer, an older gentleman named Mr. Harris, with gray hair, thick glasses, and a voice that moved slow but firm. He came to Rosie's apartment the following morning, shook my hand, and sat with me like I mattered. They're trying to paint you as confused, he said after reviewing the documents. But if we can show the court that you're competent, they won't succeed. I can speak for myself, I said proudly. I believe you, he said. We just need the proof. He helped me schedule an independent evaluation with a doctor. He told me what questions might come up. Memory tests. Basic math. Understanding of finances. Names of my children. I practiced every night, though I didn't really need to. I remembered everything. Especially the pain. Especially their names. When the doctor came to see me, I was ready. I greeted him with tea. I answered every question, even the hard ones. I told him my full address, my bank balance, my date of birth. I even told him the date Richard died, down to the hour. The doctor smiled kindly. You're sharper than most people I've tested this week, he said. I laughed for the first time in days. But the laughter didn't last. That evening, we got a message. It was a voicemail from Matthew. Rosie played it on speaker. His voice was hard, colder than I'd ever heard. You've made this messy, Mom. All of this could have been simple. But now you've forced our hand. Don't say we didn't try to be fair. I stared at the phone long after the message ended. Fair. I whispered. I spent the next few days getting ready for court. Rosie helped me gather documents. The deed to the house before it was changed, old utility bills in my name, medical records showing I was in good health, and even photographs from every milestone in the kids' lives. I labeled each one. I wanted the judge to see. I was not some old woman falling apart. I was a mother, a protector, a fighter. On the morning of the hearing, I put on my best shoes, the ones I hadn't worn since Richard's funeral. They still shined, though the heels ached after a few steps. Rosie helped me walk, but I stood tall. The courtroom was quiet when we entered. Matthew sat with a lawyer in a sharp gray suit. Sarah was there too, sitting 2 rows behind, her eyes avoiding mine. The others were nowhere to be seen. Cowards. The judge, a woman in her 50s with eyes that had seen too much, called the room to order. Then the trial began. Matthew's lawyer went first. He spoke like he was reading from a script. Mrs. Taylor has shown signs of confusion, paranoia, and irrational behavior. Her children are concerned for her well-being and believe placing her under supervised care is in her best interest. I almost scoffed out loud. He continued. There have been multiple incidents where she forgot to pay bills. She has resisted assistance. She's refused to downsize, even when financially unstable. Lies. But I stayed quiet. Then it was our turn. Mr. Harris stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Taylor is not only of sound mind. She has been victim to a coordinated attempt to remove her from her home and separate her from her assets. We have proof the home was transferred without her informed consent. We have documentation of her finances, her memory, and her daily routines. And more importantly, we have her. He motioned to me. I stood slowly and walked to the witness box. And for the next 30 minutes I spoke. I told the judge about Richard, about the 7 children, about the late nights working, the times I went without so they could have more. I told her how I bought the house with sweat and sorrow, how I kept it for them, and how they came one day, not with love, but with legal papers to take it all. I didn't cry until I said this. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for help. All I ever asked was for them to remember. But now they're trying to erase me while I'm still alive. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Sarah wiped her eyes. The judge looked at me long and hard. Then she said, Mrs. Taylor, thank you. Please return to your seat. I sat down beside Rosie. She squeezed my hand. The judge called for a short recess before delivering her decision. Rosie and I stepped into the hallway. I leaned against the wall, my legs trembling. She gave me a water bottle and said, No matter what happens, you were amazing. I nodded. But just as we were about to head back in, Rosie's phone buzzed. She picked it up and frowned. It's an alert from your bank, she said. Hold on. Mom. She stared at the screen, eyes wide. There's been a withdrawal. A big one. $2,000. Just now. From a location across town. My heart stopped. What? Rosie looked up at me, her face pale. Someone just took your money, Mom. I felt the walls spin. It wasn't just a court case anymore. It was theft. Real dangerous theft. And someone I once held as a baby had just stolen from me. I gripped Rosie's arm as my knees buckled under me. The hallway outside the courtroom was suddenly spinning. $2,000. Gone. Just like that. Money I'd saved for emergencies. For groceries. For medicine. For when things got worse. Never imagining they already had. Are you sure? I asked, my voice cracking. It was my account? Rosie nodded, showing me her phone screen. There it was. The transaction. A withdrawal made less than 10 minutes ago at a bank across town. From my checking account. But how? I whispered. They're not even supposed to. They must have gotten access somehow, she said, furious. They have your full name, your birthday, maybe even your bank login. If one of them pretended to be you. Or if they added themselves to the account behind your back. I could hardly breathe. My mind flashed back to months ago, when Sarah had visited and asked me to sign a bank update form. She said it was to help set up automatic bill pay for me. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I trusted her. I was wrong. They're draining everything, I said softly. They're trying to erase me. $1 at a time. Rosie's eyes darkened. We need to go to the bank. Now. But the judge. I'll call Mr. Harris, she said, already dialing. He'll stall the hearing if he has to. We can't wait. We ran out of the courthouse. I moved as fast as my aching joints would allow. Rosie drove like her hands were on fire. We pulled into the bank parking lot in record time, and she helped me inside. The young teller behind the counter looked up with a polite smile that faded as soon as she saw my face. I must have looked like a storm, old and worn but ready to strike. I need to speak to a manager, I said. Now. A few minutes later, a branch manager named Karen met us in a small glass office. She wore a concerned look and offered me a seat. I believe someone accessed my account illegally, I said, handing her my ID. I need to know who. I need the security footage. I need to lock everything down. Karen tapped at her keyboard. Let me check. Yes, we do see a large cash withdrawal this morning at 11:08 a.m. It was done in person. ID was provided. What ID? I asked. She blinked. Well, actually, it was a power of attorney document, pre-authorized on the account. Says here it was added several months ago. Looks like it gives full access to Matthew Taylor. My stomach dropped. Rosie's hands flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I stared at Karen, stunned. He never told me. He never explained anything. I didn't approve that. Karen frowned. Unfortunately, the system shows it was signed in person here. We have copies of the documents. Your signature is on file. I felt cold all over. No, I said. That's not possible. Karen turned the monitor around. There it was. A scan of the document. A scribble that looked like my name, but it wasn't mine. It's forged, Rosie said, leaning forward. My mother would never give someone access like this. Especially not Matthew. Karen's eyes widened. If you believe this is identity theft or fraud, we'll need to escalate this immediately. You'll have to file a police report. Do it, I said. Right now. Karen got to work. She printed out forms, called the fraud department, and promised to freeze the account immediately. But the money was already gone. Withdrawn in cash. Untraceable. We may be able to recover it, she said gently. But it could take time. I nodded. But inside something hardened. I had forgiven a lot in my life. I'd forgiven hunger, and pain and loss. I'd forgiven disrespect and forgetfulness. But this was criminal. This was intentional. It was war now. We went straight to the police station and filed the report. The officer who took my statement was patient, kind, and quietly shocked. It's not often we get these cases with family involved, he said. But you're not the first. I felt sick hearing that. Will he be arrested? Rosie asked. Only if the DA decides to prosecute, the officer said. We'll investigate first. For now, keep everything locked down. Don't speak to him directly. That night I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, going over every sign I'd missed. Every smile that had faded too fast. Every phone call that had turned cold. They hadn't just forgotten me. They targeted me. I woke up the next morning to another blow. Rosie came in, phone in hand. Mom, they're spreading lies. Look. She showed me her screen. It was the family group chat, the one I was still not part of. Matthew had sent a long message. I don't know what's gotten into Mom. She's turning against all of us. Rosie's feeding her delusions and putting her in danger. She's refusing help, claiming we stole from her. She's not well. I wish things were different, but this is on her now. And worse, Sarah had liked the message. So did David. Even Emily chimed in. She's been acting strange for years. I think she needs serious help. Rosie's just making it worse. I felt something inside me snap. Strange. Strange. I'd been nothing but a rock for them. I hadn't changed. They had. The kids I once nursed through broken bones and heartbreak were now trying to erase me from the world like I was an inconvenience. That afternoon, we returned to the courthouse. Mr. Harris met us at the entrance. His face was stern. The judge granted us a 10-day delay, he said. But we need to act fast. I've filed a motion to dismiss the guardianship request based on the new criminal investigation. But Matthew's not backing down. I nodded. I'm ready. And I was. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Strength. But the fight was far from over. That evening, while Rosie was in the kitchen making dinner, I picked up her phone to check the news. I don't usually like television, but something told me to stay alert. I opened a local news app, and there it was, right on the front page. Elder abuse investigation opens after mother accuses son of financial exploitation. It was us. My photo. Blurred but clearly me. Matthew's name. Bold in the headline. I gasped. Rosie came running. What happened? I showed her. We read the article together. It was factual, the bank withdrawal, the forged document, the pending guardianship case. It even quoted the police department. But at the bottom, it said something that made my blood run cold. Sources say the accused, Matthew Taylor, is preparing to countersue for defamation, claiming his mother's accusations are false and damaging to his career and reputation. I looked at Rosie. Her eyes were wide with shock. He's going to sue me? I whispered. Mom, she said, sitting beside me. He's trying to scare you. He knows he's losing and this is his last shot. But it worked. For a moment I felt afraid again. Afraid of the courtroom. Afraid of being humiliated. Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid this would drag on and ruin what little peace I had left. Rosie leaned close. We can fight this, Mom. You don't have to be afraid. But I was. Until I heard the knock at the door. A loud, urgent knock. Rosie rushed over, looked through the peephole, and gasped. Mom, she whispered, turning back to me. It's Sarah. My heart leapt. I stood up slowly. Sarah hadn't visited me in over a year. Not a call, not a birthday card, not a single, I love you. And now she was at our door. Rosie opened it. Sarah stepped in, her face pale, eyes rimmed red like she'd been crying. I need to talk to you, Mom, she said, voice trembling. Can we be alone? I looked at Rosie. She hesitated, then nodded and stepped out onto the balcony. Sarah sat across from me, wringing her hands. Then she looked up. Matthew lied to all of us, she said. I leaned forward. What do you mean? She swallowed hard. He said. He said you gave him the house willingly, that you were getting forgetful, that you were scared of being alone and asked him to take over. He said Rosie was manipulating you. But now, I'm not so sure. He's hiding something, Mom. Something big. And I think it's going to ruin all of us if it comes out. I felt the air shift. What is it, Sarah? I asked. Her lips quivered. And then she whispered. Mom, Matthew took more than just your money. I froze. She looked me dead in the eye. He took something you never even knew you lost. And my heart dropped as she said. He's been hiding a secret about Dad. My mouth went dry. What did you just say? I asked, barely able to form the words. Sarah looked away. Her hands were trembling in her lap. She couldn't look at me. Matthew, he found something after Dad died. Something he kept from you. From all of us. The air in the room felt thick. I could hear Rosie pacing on the balcony outside, unaware that the ground beneath us had just cracked open. Sarah, I said slowly. What did he find? She shook her head. I didn't believe it at first. But last week he slipped up. He was angry that Rosie had gone to the police. He was pacing around, yelling, saying we were all going to be dragged down if this went public. I asked him what he meant and he shouted, You think she'd forgive me if she knew what I found in Dad's files? My heart pounded in my chest. Richard? My Richard? What files? I asked. What was he talking about? Sarah hesitated. Then she pulled a folded envelope from her purse. He kept these in the attic, she said. At the old house. I went back yesterday while he was at work. I had a key from before. I found this hidden in a box marked Tax Records, 1984. She handed it to me with shaking fingers. I took the envelope carefully and unfolded the papers inside. There were several faded documents, some handwritten notes, and a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Richard's. The letter was addressed to Matthew. "Son," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There's something I never told your mother. I wanted to. God knows I did. But I didn't know how. I made mistakes before I met her. One of those mistakes is about to come knocking one day. When it does, protect your mother. Don't let her know. She's carried too much already." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. "What is this?" I whispered. "What mistake?" Sarah handed me another paper. It was a birth certificate, and under the section for father's name was Richard Taylor, but the mother's name was Mary Ann Holt. Not me. I stared at the document. The date said 1964. "That's before you and Dad married," Sarah said gently. "Matthew found this after the funeral. He told me about it once years ago. Said it didn't mean anything. That he handled it. But now, I think it's connected to everything. The money. The guardianship. The house." I felt dizzy. Richard had another child? And never told me? My whole world tilted. I had spent my entire life building a home. Building a family. Never knowing it had already started without me. "I don't understand," I said, pressing the paper to my chest. "Why would Matthew hide this?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Because that other child, she found Matthew. A few months ago. Her name is Allison. She contacted him. Said she didn't want anything, just the truth. But Matthew didn't tell her about you. Instead, he told her you were dead." "What?" I gasped. "He lied. Then he offered her money to stay away. And when she said no, he got scared. Started trying to lock everything down. The house. Your money. Your legal rights. I think he thought if you found out about Allison, it would ruin everything. So he tried to silence you, before you ever heard her name." "Ist der Herr, nom." "How could he do this to me?" I whispered. "To his own mother?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I don't know, Mom. But I think he's in deep. Too deep to back out now. And I don't want to be a part of it anymore. I want to help you fix this." I reached out, took her hand and held it. For the first time in years, I saw the little girl in her again. The one who used to cry when her shoes didn't match, who once told me she'd never leave me. For a moment, I let myself feel a flicker of hope. But it didn't last. The next morning, Rosie got a knock on the door. It was early, the sun barely creeping through the blinds. She opened it, and a man in a blue uniform handed her a large white envelope. "Notice to appear," he said. "Civil court. Emergency hearing." Rosie read the papers out loud while I stood frozen in the kitchen. Matthew was suing me for defamation, financial retaliation, and emotional distress, and the hearing was scheduled for 3 days from now. "He's trying to bury you in court," Rosie said. "He wants to scare you into silence." Sarah was pacing the room. "We need proof. Proof that he forged the power of attorney. That he accessed the bank account without your consent. That he lied about Dad's child. We need everything." "And fast," I said. We got to work. Rosie contacted the bank again and requested all security footage from the day of the withdrawal. She had to file a formal petition through the Fraud Investigation Unit, but they agreed to process it quickly due to the ongoing police report. Meanwhile, Sarah reached out to someone she hadn't spoken to in decades, her old high school friend, Lila, who now worked as a paralegal. Lila agreed to help us search court filings, old bank records, and any documents with my signature. And me? I called Allison. It took hours of digging, calling adoption agencies, and finally asking a favor from the same legal aid office Mr. Harris worked with. But they found her. When she answered the phone, I froze. Her voice was calm, soft. "This is Allison." I cleared my throat. "My name is Clara Taylor. I believe I'm your father's wife. Or was." Silence. Then a breath. "I was hoping you'd call someday," she said. We met at a small cafe that evening. Allison had Richard's eyes. There was no denying it. She looked nothing like me. but everything like the man I buried decades ago. I'm not here to make trouble, she said as soon as we sat down. I don't want money. I just want the truth. I nodded. So do I. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her mother, Mary Ann, who had passed away 5 years earlier. Richard had known about the child, but they'd separated quietly before Allison was born. He never came back. But he left me letters, she said, reaching into her purse. Old ones. I kept them. She handed me one. It was addressed to my little secret. I held the paper like it was made of glass. I couldn't read it, not yet. But I felt something shift in me. Something heavy. But real. Would you be willing to testify? I asked softly. She nodded. If it helps stop Matthew? Absolutely. Back at Rosie's apartment, we gathered everything. We had the forged signature. We had the bank footage request pending. We had Sarah ready to confess under oath. And now we had Allison. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the moon hang quietly in the sky. So much had changed. The family I built was no longer what it used to be. But maybe, just maybe, there was a new beginning hiding in the mess. The morning of the court hearing arrived. I dressed carefully, buttoned up my blouse, fixed my hair. I looked in the mirror and saw someone who'd survived too much to be silenced now. At the courthouse, we saw Matthew waiting with his lawyer. He didn't even look at me. But when Allison entered the room behind us, Matthew's face turned white. I stood, spine straight, and looked him dead in the eye. I know everything. His mouth opened, then closed, and then the bailiff called us in. The courtroom doors swung wide. I stepped forward, ready to speak the truth. But as I crossed the threshold, a man in a black suit stepped forward. Wait, he said. Clara Taylor? Yes, I answered. He handed me a red stamped document. Court order, he said. Filed this morning by Matthew Taylor. Emergency injunction. He's trying to freeze all your assets, permanently. Rosie gasped. Sarah swore. But I just stood there. Because I knew. This was Matthew's final move. And I was going to tear it all down. I held the document in my hands. Red stamp. Cold final words. Emergency injunction. Request to freeze all remaining assets of Clara Taylor, due to pending legal investigation. Rosie stepped forward and yanked the paper from the man's grip. This is insane, she hissed. How is this even allowed? The man shrugged. Filed under emergency motion laws. The judge hasn't ruled yet, but until she does, your mother can't move any funds. I stood frozen, my hands shaking. He's trying to choke me, I whispered. He's trying to make sure I can't even afford a lawyer. Sarah was pacing again, her voice shaking. He knows his time's running out. He's pushing every button he has left. If he freezes her account and wins this hearing, Mom could lose everything. Not just the house. Not just the money. Her name. Her right to live how she wants. We walked into the courtroom and took our seats. Matthew was already there, sitting stiffly beside his lawyer, refusing to look at me. He had a folder on the table, labeled neatly in black marker. Clara incapacity plus damages. A lump rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I was not going to break today. The judge entered. A different one this time. A younger woman with sharp eyes and a straight face. She looked over the documents quickly, then raised her eyes. Mr. Taylor is requesting a permanent freeze on Mrs. Taylor's financial accounts while claims of emotional instability, fraudulent behavior and family endangerment are investigated, she said aloud. Mrs. Taylor, do you have representation? Mr. Harris stood beside me. We do, Your Honor. And we have significant counter-evidence to present. I nodded slowly. Your Honor, I said, forcing my voice not to tremble. This is not a case about instability. This is a case about betrayal. And I have proof. The judge looked interested. Proceed. Mr. Harris began slowly, pulling out document after document. The letter Richard wrote to Matthew, the birth certificate of Allison, the hidden transfer of my home deed, the forged signature on the financial authorization, and even a printed transcript of the voicemail Matthew had left, the one where he said I'd forced their hand. The judge listened, quietly flipping through the papers. Matthew's lawyer objected several times, but she let Mr. Harris continue. Then it was time for witnesses. Sarah stepped up first. Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. My mother raised 7 kids on her own after our father passed. She worked herself to the bone. She trusted us. And I was part of the betrayal. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I signed off on the house transfer. I didn't ask questions. Matthew said it was best for her. I believed him. She looked straight at Matthew. He lied to all of us. Next, Rosie took the stand. Her tone was fire and steel. She took care of everyone, gave everything. And when she finally needed help, they tried to lock her out of her own life. I've watched her every day for months. She's sharp, she's clear, she's independent. The only thing wrong with her is that she loved the wrong people too much. The courtroom fell quiet. And then Allison stepped forward. There was a murmur across the room. She introduced herself calmly. I'm Allison Holt. My father was Richard Taylor. Gasps. Even Matthew's lawyer looked stunned. I met Matthew several months ago, she continued. I asked about Mrs. Taylor. He told me she was dead. Then he offered me money to go away. She handed over her phone, which had recorded their meeting. The courtroom played the audio aloud. Matthew's voice came through clearly. If you say anything, you'll ruin everything. She doesn't even know you exist. And she never will. The judge looked visibly disturbed. Matthew's lawyer stood and requested a recess, but the judge held up her hand. I've heard enough, she said. She turned to Matthew. Mr. Taylor, not only have you filed for legal control of your mother's life under false pretenses, but you have actively misled this court by omitting crucial information. Your request to freeze her assets is denied. Rosie let out a cry of relief. I closed my eyes. But the judge wasn't finished. In fact, she continued, this court is opening an investigation into financial abuse and fraud. She turned to the bailiff. Please escort Mr. Taylor out of the courtroom. He is under review for obstruction. Matthew stood, his face red, his lips pressed in a thin line. For the first time in months, he looked me in the eye. I did this for us, he said bitterly. You left us with nothing. You gave everything to a dream that never existed. No, I said calmly. I gave everything to the people I loved. You just weren't one of them. He was taken away. The room slowly cleared out. Sarah wept quietly beside me. Rosie hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. Allison walked up slowly and placed her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry it happened this way, she said softly. But I'm glad you know. I looked up at her. Her eyes reminded me so much of Richard's that my heart cracked open again. Would you want to stay in touch? I asked. She smiled. I'd like that. The days that followed were quiet. For the first time in years there was peace in my bones. The house was still gone. My savings had taken a hit. The scars ran deep. But I was no longer afraid. With legal help we began to undo the damages. The forged documents were overturned. The guardianship case was dismissed. And with the fraud charges, I even began the process of reclaiming my home. Rosie moved back in with me. Sarah came over every Sunday for coffee and apologies. We didn't speak much of the past, but every week she stayed longer. And Allison? She came by too. She brought photo albums. Her own family. We laughed. We cried. We began again. And me? I kept living. I sat in my garden each morning with my tea. I spoke to the birds. I watered my roses. And I thank God that even after everything, the loneliness, the betrayal, the heartbreak, I still had the strength to be me. To any woman listening, to any mother whose heart is heavy, let this story be your fire. Love your children, yes, but never forget yourself. Because the only thing worse than losing everything is losing who you are in the process. And I found her again. Her name is Clara Taylor. And she is not done living. It had been 3 months since the court hearing. 3 months since Matthew was removed from the courtroom with his lies exposed and his legacy cracked like broken glass. 3 months since I found out about Allison, the daughter I never knew my husband had, but somehow the one person who brought me clarity when my own children turned their backs. But just when I thought the storm had passed, life showed me. The past never stays buried forever. It was a cold Wednesday morning. I remember because the garden was covered in a thin sheet of frost, and I just stepped outside with my scarf wrapped around my shoulders, cradling a warm mug of tea between my hands. Rosie was inside, typing loudly at the kitchen table, working on her freelance project. And Sarah had just texted saying she'd stop by later with groceries. The quiet felt good. But peace never knocks, trouble always does. And that morning it did. A car pulled up. Black. Quiet. Sleek. Not the kind you expect in a sleepy old neighborhood like mine. Out stepped a man in a gray suit and a woman with thick glasses. They looked like they walked out of some government office. Both carried leather folders and wore polite, unreadable faces. "Mrs. Clara Taylor?" the man asked. I stood up straighter. "Yes." He handed me a card. "We're with the Office of Estate and Probate Review. We're reopening your late husband Richard Taylor's case due to new information involving concealed assets." My fingers tightened around the mug. "I'm sorry, what assets?" The woman adjusted her glasses and opened her folder. There were bank accounts your husband held overseas. Hidden. Untouched for decades. A whistleblower in a financial firm came forward after noticing dormant transactions tied to your husband's social security number. "What kind of accounts?" I asked cautiously. She showed me a list. It was long. And the numbers, they weren't small. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some accounts opened before we married. Others after. There's a possibility these were part of a private inheritance, or something more complicated, the man said. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the porch bench. "Why now?" "We believe one of your children attempted to access these funds recently. That's what triggered the review." My heart dropped. One of them? Matthew was under investigation. But the rest, could it be? No. No, not after everything. Not after the healing. Not after Sarah had finally come back. Not after I started trusting again. "Do you know which child?" I asked quietly. The woman closed her folder. "We're still investigating. But we do need to ask, were you aware of these accounts?" I shook my head. "Never. Richard didn't speak about money unless it was for fixing the roof or buying school shoes. And if he had all that, we would have lived differently. We would have been different." They nodded. Said thank you. Left with their folders and quiet eyes. And I just sat there. The air had gone still. The wind had stopped moving the leaves. And in my chest, that old ache began to stir again. The one I thought was gone. Later that day, I gathered Sarah and Rosie around the table. Allison joined us by video call. I told them everything. Rosie's mouth fell open. Hidden accounts? Overseas. Sarah looked like she'd seen a ghost. Allison just said, "That doesn't sound like the man in his letters." I looked at Sarah. Her eyes darted down, her fingers fidgeting. "Sarah," I said slowly, "do you know anything about this?" She shook her head. But not fast enough. And not convincingly. "Sarah." She swallowed. Then finally she broke. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Yes. I knew." Rosie slammed her hand on the table. "What?" Sarah stood quickly, her face red, tears already falling. "Not everything. I didn't know it was that much. I overheard Matthew talking to someone before the trial. He mentioned an offshore account Dad used to have. Said he couldn't access it because of Mom. I thought it was just another lie." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "You stood in court. You said you wanted to help me. Why lie again?" "Because I was scared," she shouted. "I didn't want to lose you again. I thought if I told you, you'd think I was still protecting him. That I was still with him." Tears blurred my vision. "All I ever wanted was the truth, Sarah. You're my daughter. I raised you. I carried you through every storm. But I can't keep letting you hurt me to protect him." "I'm not protecting him," she said softly. "I was protecting me." The room went quiet. She left shortly after that. Rosie hugged me for a long time. Allison stayed on the call and didn't say a word. She just watched me, a sadness in her eyes that felt familiar. Like she knew what it was like to be betrayed by blood. That night I sat alone at the dining table. The house was too quiet. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer in my chest. I opened one of Richard's old letters. One I hadn't dared to read until now. In it he wrote, "There are things I never said. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was a coward. I built a second life once long before I built the one with you. And sometimes the past doesn't stay where we bury it. If it ever comes back. Know this, my real life began the day I married you. Everything before that was just shadows." I read the letter 3 times before folding it shut. The next morning, a new envelope arrived. It was from the estate office. Inside, a simple note. "The individual who attempted to access the account has been identified. We will be contacting you directly for formal testimony." I turned it over. And there it was. The name. Sarah Taylor. My hand shook. My vision blurred. And just like that, everything we'd started rebuilding collapsed again. The betrayal wasn't over. It had only just begun. I sat in the garden that morning, staring at the letter in my hand. Sarah's name, printed in bold, clear, unforgiving. The daughter who cried beside me in court. The one who apologized. Who said she'd come home. The one who stood against her brother, promising she'd finally seen the truth. And now this. She tried to access Richard's hidden accounts behind my back. After everything. After all the healing. The betrayal stung deeper than anything Matthew had ever done. His lies were loud. His manipulation was calculated. But Sarah's betrayal, it was quiet. Dressed in hugs. Coated in "I'm sorry." It wore the mask of family. Rosie found me an hour later. I was still sitting outside, the letter limp in my hands, the tea cold beside me. She sat next to me, didn't say anything at first. Just looked at the trees with me. Let the silence settle. Then finally, softly, she asked, "What now?" I took a deep breath. I need to talk to her. Face to face. She nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No," I said. "This one. I need to do alone." Later that evening, I drove to Sarah's apartment. My heart pounded the whole way. The rain had started, and it hit the windshield like angry fingertips. Every red light felt like it was warning me. "Are you sure you want to go?" I knocked on her door. It took her a long time to answer. When she opened it, she looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair was a mess. She looked more like the little girl I used to rock to sleep than the woman who tried to rob me blind. She stepped aside. "Come in, Mom." I walked in slowly. Her place was quiet. Clean. A candle burned on the kitchen table. Lavender. "Why?" I asked, turning to face her. "Why would you do it, Sarah? After everything we've been through?" She didn't answer right away. She sat down, folded her hands. Then she whispered, "Because I thought I deserved it." I blinked. "What?" She looked up at me, her eyes wet again. "When I found out about the accounts, I thought, maybe this was Dad's way of making it right. Maybe that money was always meant to come to us, to me. I've been drowning, Mom. I'm in debt. I made mistakes after the divorce. And I thought, just this once, I could take something that felt owed." I stared at her. "But it wasn't yours to take." "I know that now," she said, crying openly. "The second I submitted that request, I felt sick. I regretted it. I didn't know how to undo it without you finding out." "So you were going to hide it again?" She broke. "I was scared you'd never forgive me." I sat down across from her. "Sarah, do you even realize what this has done to me? I gave everything for you kids. I lost my husband. I lost my home. I lost years of my life just trying to survive, for all of you. And after all that, I still showed up. I still forgave. I still loved. And you took that and tried to trade it for money." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did," I said. "And I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again." She sobbed. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of Richard's letter. I slid it across the table. She looked at it, confused. "This is who your father really was," I said. "Not a hero. Not a villain. Just a broken man who kept secrets. And you were about to become him." She stared at the paper for a long time. Then whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I truly am. I don't deserve anything from you. Not your money. Not your forgiveness. Not even this visit." I stood up slowly. "Maybe not. But I didn't raise you to rot in your mistakes. I raised you to face them. She looked up at me surprised. I'm giving you a choice, I said. You come forward. You admit what you did to the estate investigators. You tell the truth. All of it. No lies.
No hiding.
You make this right. And maybe we can rebuild. But if you walk away again, this door stays shut. She nodded slowly. I'll do it. I promise. I left without hugging her. I had nothing left to give in that moment. But I left the door cracked open, just enough for her to crawl back through. The next few weeks passed quietly. Sarah came forward. She met with the investigators. She returned every cent she touched. The accounts were frozen permanently, locked in a legal vault that no one would ever touch again. Allison helped me work with the lawyers to donate most of the uncovered funds to causes Richard once spoke of. Veterans' homes, libraries, orphanages. I kept a small portion, just enough to secure my care, my house, and Rosie's future. Matthew never returned. His case moved slowly and I let it. I wanted nothing more from him. I built a new will. This time carefully. With protection. With intention. With love, not just sentiment. And I made peace. Not with the betrayal but with the truth. That sometimes the ones we raise can break us. But we heal anyway. We live anyway. We love again, cautiously, bravely. Because that's what mothers do. The last scene of this story isn't dramatic. There are no courtrooms. No screaming. No shocking twists. Just me. In the garden. Sun warming my face. Birds fluttering above. Rosie is trimming the roses beside me, humming. Allison is on the porch, reading quietly. And inside the house, Sarah is washing the dishes. She still comes by. She's trying. She's not perfect. None of them are. But I learned something. After all the betrayal, you can survive being broken. If you remember how to hold yourself together. And I did. Not for them. For me. Because I am Clara Taylor. I raised 7 kids. I lost everything. And I still rose. This is my story. And it does not end in defeat. Subscribe to Grandma's Story YouTube channel for more fascinating and interesting family betrayal story.